Plus, the big headline today is the heat, and it has constituted a weather impact alert that we have in place for this afternoon into the early evening hours. Going to have some possibly dangerous heat indices. So those heat indices, as you hear me refer to that, that's going to be your feels like temperature when you factor in that humidity with the actual temperature later this afternoon. So heat indices up to 108 are going to be possible. Yes, that is a blistering hot day, and by far the warmest air that we've seen so far in the year of 2025. The two things that you need to know are going to be hydrate, hydrate, and hydrate. So anytime that you think that, okay, maybe you're a little parched, maybe you're a little thirsty, get yourself a good drink of water, electrolytes throughout the day, and continue to rehydrate all throughout the day. Take breaks in the AC, and if you don't have any AC available to you, well, make sure you take breaks in the shade, somewhere where it is a little bit cooler, maybe getting under an awning, getting in the shade of any kind of trees that you do see, somewhere where it's just not blistering hot in that direct sunlight. And along with that, there's plenty of other heat tips that we'll go over as we get into this extended forecast, because today and tomorrow, in fact, are going to be blistering hot days. We have a heat advisory in place for today. That's your main headline. Heat indices 105 plus, at least for today and tomorrow, but a little bit of good news that we'll talk about. Well, maybe good news. That's going to be relative to how you think a couple of showers and thunderstorms are going to sound in the forecast for tomorrow, but we still look at heat indices 105 plus to pop up before we get into that time frame. The storm chances are back tomorrow, as you see that bottom headline right there. The next 2 days are really going to be the main talking points of the weather. Once we get into Thursday, a little bit of relief in terms of the blistering hot heat and settling back into a more typical forecast that we're used to seeing during the summertime months. So here's how we started the day. All across central Georgia, bright blue sky. Not a single cloud can be found so far, so we didn't have anything in the way of cloud cover to maybe slow that warm up just a little bit for the morning hours. Once the sun popped up, it probably took about 30 minutes to an hour, and then those temperatures have been skyrocketing ever since. So you can see plenty of sunshine far and wide, whether you're walking out the door in Macon, Dublin, down in Warner Robins, or down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, where the sun is very bright. You can see that the skies are kind of looking a little bit white. We may have a little bit of thin cloud cover out there, but not much in the way of clouds throughout today. Here's a look at the current numbers. Not so bad. Mid 80s, upper 80s. Doesn't look like anyone's quite to the 90-degree mark. But then we flash it over to, well, I was going to say the dew points, but I forgot. We always like to put it in perspective. So not even the warmest numbers that we do see on the board, that's actually going to be found up the eastern coast of the United States. 88 in Charleston, 90 already in Charlotte, 92 in Virginia Beach, 91 all the way up in D.C. We're actually a little bit cooler down here along the Gulf Coast in areas like Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Still very warm in Panama City, but not too far off what our temperatures are here in Macon. Temperatures in Texas, not too bad so far, somewhere in the 70s, the low 80s, maybe some rain-cooled air out there in Texas with some active weather possibly, but we'll get a look at that in just a few. Here's a look at your dew points. This is what I wanted to mention. So plenty of dark green color that is spanning not only in central Georgia, to the west of us over the state line into Alabama, all the way north of us into the mountains, into the metro Atlanta area, back over to the east into South Carolina, and down to the west. We see plenty of the dark green shade, which of course is the muggy air that you can wear. That's the color we don't like to see, but it will become more frequent as we're really into the thick of summertime now. Dew point temperatures are hovering somewhere in the mid 70s, the upper 70s, and 81 down in Cordele. So once you get these dew point temperatures in the mid to upper 70s, they're going to have an exponential impact on what that feels like number is, especially if you get dew point temperatures above the 80-degree mark like you see in Crisp County. So some of those areas where the green was a bit darker, that's going to correlate to some flashes of pink already. Before we even get to the 11 a.m. hour, right now it feels like 93 up in Macon, 94 in Warner Robins, already seeing some triple digits pop up. Feels like 100 in Gordon, 100 in Unadilla, 98 in Rochelle and Cordele down in our southernmost counties. Not quite sure if that's entirely accurate. You do see that patch of pink down there. I think they're probably feeling pretty similar to 100, maybe even a little bit higher. But the key with this is right now, these values are already this high, and we haven't even gotten into that warmest portion of the afternoon. So we are just going to continue to see these numbers climb up the feels like temperature scale. Probably the areas that are feeling the best right now, Swainsboro and Eastman at 92 and 91 degrees, another 92 over in Thomaston. But either way, you're feeling like the low 90s or you're feeling like the upper 90s near 100, and everyone is expected to join some form of that shade of pink heading into the afternoon. Here's a look at your winds and your wind gusts. Do we have a breeze that is going to be present for maybe a little bit of occasional relief? Well, number one, the breeze today would just be blowing that very muggy air around, so I don't know about how much relief. It would be a very, very warm breeze, maybe a little insult to injury. But we're not seeing much of the winds whatsoever. A calm, maybe a steady breeze about 3 to 5 miles per hour. This is what we're expecting this afternoon. We're not expecting anything in the way of some gusty winds. But now let's get into our heat advisory. What specifically does that mean? Well, number one, this is the first heat alert that we've seen issued for the summer of 2025. So we're very used to actually seeing heat advisories pretty commonly once we go into June, July, into August, maybe a little bit into September. But the heat advisory is going to be for those feels-like temperatures up to 108 degrees. That covers all of central Georgia, but not only us, once again, over to the west into Alabama, over to the east in South Carolina. Many areas all in the southeast and up the east coast of the United States are under what we're calling a heat dome right now. So it's a high-pressure ridge, and it's not going to allow for much in the way of convective pop-up showers and storms into this afternoon. It's really just going to usher in some very humid air, and it's just going to usher in some cooler temperatures. So it's just going to allow for that warm up without anything in the way of rain today. And this is spanning way, way farther than just our neck of the woods here in central Georgia. It is going all across many portions of the country. So that heat advisory, that's what we have issued for today. Wouldn't be surprised to see one issued for tomorrow. The one today is going to go from 11 a.m., so coming up here at the top of the hour, all the way until the 8 p.m. hour later tonight. Once we start closing in on the sunset time, and then we'll finally see those temperatures drop down as the sun does dip below the horizon. But thankfully, it's not an excessive heat watch. Thankfully, it's not an excessive heat warning. That's what we're going to start to keep our eye out for more as we go into the summertime months, because like I said, heat advisories are very frequent, but this is the first one of the summer so far. So that's why we're issuing that weather impact alert for it. But once we start to get these more and more, maybe a couple times every week, not going to do a weather impact alert for each and every one of them. Temperatures are all relative to what you have been feeling. So not necessarily used to this kind of blistering heat so far, but after today and tomorrow, you'll kind of know what it feels like. So by the time the next one pops up, you'll be pretty prepared for it. So nothing in the way of cloud cover, nothing in the way of rain in the entire state of Georgia, it looks like. So clear blue skies ahead, a few clouds all around us, maybe a couple of showers down on the Gulf Coast of Alabama and Mississippi. But overall, we don't see anything in the way of rain, giving you an idea of what this high pressure ridge is really doing. It's drying our atmosphere out in the upper levels. We have plenty of humidity at the surface, as you just saw, but it's not going to be allowed to continue to rise. It's going to reach that cap. Kind of think of it like you're boiling some water. When you boil some water on a pan on your stove, then obviously it can continue to boil. All of that warm water vapor can continue to rise up, but we're kind of putting a lid on that. So kind of like you're cooking some rice on the stovetop today, that's what that ridge is doing. It's putting a lid on that, trapping all that heat and all that moisture at the surface. So let's talk about our hour by hour temperatures. I really don't know why I continue to show you this graphic, because it always undershoots what our actual high temperatures are. Low 90s over the next couple of hours, increasing to the mid 90s. I don't think that's very accurate of what our temperatures are going to be. So this heat index graph is going to go off of what those actual temperatures are. So topping out at 106, maybe around the 4 p.m. hour. I still don't believe that's the highest that some areas do get. I still think 108, 109, 110 is definitely within the realm of possibility. But anything above 108 is going to be in isolated spots. I think more so 105s, 106s, 107s, 108s. That's going to be more widespread on your heat index map later on this afternoon. Nonetheless, if it feels like 105 as opposed to 110, yes, 110 is worse, but they're really feeling the same once you get above the triple digits. It is just downright hot and downright steamy. So taking a look at your almanac yesterday, 94 was your high temperature. We're definitely looking to eclipse that today. So already, average high this time of year is 92 degrees. Won't pay too much attention to the lows. We've been starting out around 70 degrees, maybe the low 70s each and every day. But 94 yesterday was about 10 degrees off of the record set back in 2022 of 104. Boy, if we had temperatures forecasted that high today, paired up with this humidity, we would definitely be talking about excessive heat warning criteria with feels like numbers maybe into the 115s. So record low, 56 degrees, 1966. I always say it's nice to not have that number with a 5 in front of it for a little bit of a chill because it is June. But a 56 this morning, that would have felt mighty nice compared to what's going to be in store this afternoon. Haven't recorded rain in a little bit at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. That's okay because we established a really good cushion with lots and lots of rainfall over the past week or two. So we're still hovering just shy of about 3 inches above where we should be this time of year. However, we look to add some more rainfall totals to that number going into tomorrow afternoon and evening. Sunrise yesterday, 6:28 and 8:46 was the sunset. So now we're going to start to see the sunrise and the sunset get a little bit closer. Those hours of daylight are steadily shrinking now that we've officially entered the summer season. That longest day of the year was this past Saturday, so the days will get a little bit shorter each and every day until we get to the first day of winter, a couple days before Christmas. 92 degrees for a high and 70 degrees for your average low. Once again, the same values that we saw yesterday. I do want to turn your attention to the record. Back in 1930, 101 degrees is the record all time for that average high. Our highs are going to get very, very close to that number throughout today. You'll see it on the today graphic. We'll talk about number one, the main headline, blistering hot, of course, but staying mostly dry is what's going to allow for these temperatures to take an extra step upward. We're not going to get afternoon activity in the form of showers, in the form of storms to cool us down just before we hit that warmest temperature. So it looks like our temperatures will warm up as much as they possibly can today. And of course, the humidity is going to make them feel a little bit warmer. How about 99 for a high temperature today? And in fact, it's not the warmest temperature I have forecasted on your 7-day forecast. A little bit of a teaser for what's in store tomorrow. But 92 is your average high, so this would put us in the neighborhood of about 7 degrees above average. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 100 or a 101 pop up in some isolated spots. But again, to gain that record, we have to match it, number one, at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, or we have to go above that number. Don't quite think that Macon will pop up a 102, but anything is possible when you have this summertime heat and a setup like we do have with this upper level ridge kind of just really placing a lot of warm and muggy air on top of us and not a whole lot of rain. So let's go through future view. We'll talk about the rain chances today because if you watched this morning, you probably saw I have a 10% on the 7-day forecast because it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. You see plenty of scattered light green dots all across future view, whether they're over to the west of us or they're here in central Georgia, but it really doesn't look like you have a very good chance of rain today. If you do find something in the way of rain, go play the lottery because it is a very, very slim chance. And anything you get in the way of rain, consider yourself very lucky because it's going to give you a little bit of a cool down. Maybe not allow those temperatures to reach the values that they're forecasted at the very most to hit. Now let's go into Wednesday morning. Starting out mostly clear, maybe some thin high-level clouds in the forecast, and still remaining dry for the first half of Wednesday. So just like we've done so far today, we're expected to do the same thing for your Wednesday morning into the early afternoon, but seeing a couple of bubbles of green up to the north of us around the Atlanta area. We go to about 3 o'clock. A lot of those scattered showers are getting fairly close to us in central Georgia and really getting a little more organization as we go into Wednesday late afternoon. Right around 5 o'clock, could be greeted by a scattered shower, maybe a storm in nature as you're making your evening commute home from work. And then it does look like a bunch of these showers, maybe even some storms, try to group and cluster together for more widespread impacts going into 6 p.m., 7, 8 p.m. That's pretty good coverage of some rain right there, which is going to be a good thing. Hopefully this is going to have widespread impacts, really knock down all of those temperatures. And then we go into the nighttime hours where activity is still lingering, plenty of active activity down to the south, the southwest of us, over towards Montgomery and Alabama, but some darker reds in there. So that does mean some storms are going to be possible, maybe of the strong, maybe even of the severe nature. And we're really looking at a different scenario for your Wednesday as opposed to today because that upper level ridge pattern that I was talking about is expected to break apart just a little bit. So it's going to lead to more convection, more rising motion of air. And obviously we have everything at the surface that we need to sprout some afternoon rain chances. So that's why we're continuing to see pretty good widespread coverage for Wednesday as opposed to what's in store for today. Now we go into Thursday, and this is where we finally see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Wednesday is just going to be a little bit of a taste of both. We're going to see the heat and the humidity run rampant in the first half of the day, and then the late afternoon and evening hours is going to have the potential for some strong, maybe some severe weather. So Wednesday is definitely just that one day that you really don't want to come across on the 7-day forecast, but sometimes we have to get through those very bad days in the forecast in order to lead to days like maybe this, which is in store for Thursday. Not much activity whatsoever in the way of rain. Anything that does occur is going to be very scattered in nature. And this looks to actually be courtesy of what we call some sea breeze precipitation. So we have these winds moving off the Atlantic coast farther inland. So that is going to contribute to kind of that motion from east to maybe up to the northwest here in central Georgia. A couple of those could hold together, maybe a shower or a storm. I think you have the best chance of seeing those hold together in our far southeastern counties like Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery, Treutlen counties. But we'll see if that comes to fruition. And then we'll talk about our storm outlooks, which number one for day 2, Wednesday. Yes, this is definitely looking pretty reminiscent or agreeing, I guess you could say, with what FutureView did say. So we're looking at the potential impacts of a strong or a severe storm that does get warned. Gusty winds and even some possible hail, pretty similar to most of the thunderstorms we've seen as of recently. But we are sandwiched between 2 level 2 risk, one down to our south and our southwest in that yellow shade, and then you do see another yellow shade up to the north and the northeast of us. Those yellow shades, we're right there in the middle of them, so I wouldn't be surprised if between now and tomorrow we maybe see some of those yellow shades creep into central Georgia. Nonetheless, if you're in a level 2 or a level 1, just know you have the potential for seeing a strong or a severe storm in nature, just with some gusty winds, some possible hail. You hear things getting loud outside, you see dark clouds in the distance. Just go ahead and make plans to head indoors until that storm does ride over you. And then finally, you'll be greeted with some cooler temperatures after some of the more intense rainfall that these storms will have. So we'll be very thankful that it's at least coming in the form of storms. I know they're damaging, but the saving grace is heavy rainfall is definitely going to substantially cool those temperatures down. Now this is where I'm scratching my head just a little bit. Day 3 storm outlook, all of us are in a level 1 risk. Well, number 1, FutureView did not show much in the way of activity whatsoever, but it doesn't really look like there's much organization with the rain chances on Thursday afternoon. So that's why I'm scratching my head a little bit. Typically, we don't see these issued for maybe your typical pop-up summertime showers and storms. You need some kind of organization with potential severe weather. I didn't see much indicating that whatsoever on Thursday. So just kind of add it to the list of maybe a couple of grievances we've had with the SPC as of recently. But nonetheless, it's still just showing you that you can't rule out maybe a strong or a severe thunderstorm going into Thursday afternoon, which I do think could be in the cards, but a lot less confidence for Thursday as opposed to your Wednesday. So let's talk about that humidity. We actually do see a little bit of a downtick here on the Muggy meter between today and tomorrow. Will that come to fruition? Only time will tell. This Muggy meter isn't necessarily the most accurate representation of our moisture content. And we do know that typically we hover a little bit above what some of these points are. I mean, all of our dew points are in that dark green shade right now, and it still has us pinpointed right between the 60s and the 70s. We should definitely be more here in the upper end of the box, with some areas already with dew point temperatures near the 80-degree mark. So give or take a little bit with where these points are. I do think we're probably on the higher end of where each of these are. It looks like we try to get a little bit of a drier influx of air going into tomorrow. Not quite sure I'm really buying that, because we'll take a look at your afternoon highs and then we'll take a look at those heat indices over the next 5 days as well. 99 the high today. I went with 100 on Wednesday because it does look like we're going to get a very good ample time period of some warming up before the rain does arrive tomorrow. And I think 100 would definitely be the area that some areas max out at, especially down to the south and the southeast. Those areas that were a little bit later into the afternoon and the evening hours to get some rain. Then we go back down closer to average, 93, 92, 92 for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I don't think I've ever been so relieved to forecast some low 90s as we head into the weekend, right there around average. But of course, with the humidity present, we are going to see each and every one of these days feel a little bit warmer. 108, that max feels like temperature for today. Maybe a little bit of relief, a nice and crisp, cool 107 for Wednesday. So it's basically going to be the same story again tomorrow. The only difference is I think that heat advisory that will get issued for tomorrow is just going to have a shorter time frame. maybe only till about 5 or 6 o'clock as opposed to 8 p.m. So not much relief whatsoever. Still going to see heat indices that probably do crawl into heat advisory criteria. And then forecasting heat indices right now, upper 90s, near 100 for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It's a little bit more bearable. And I say all this to tell you that it's still just going to be hot each and every day. Today and tomorrow are just going to have a little bit of an extra punch to them as opposed to heading into the weekend. But hopefully we will get back to these very typical summertime forecasts going into the weekend where the rain chances are very scattered. You have a better likelihood of not seeing rain as opposed to catching a shower or a storm. So with these very warm temperatures and these very warm heat indices, another reminder, if it's too hot for you to be outside, that's your number one indication that it's too hot for your pets to be outside. Make sure that you're giving them some kind of insulation when walking them on those hard surfaces. Highs today, 99, near 100 tomorrow. So you can add a couple of degrees to these values that you do see because we max out at 95 for that actual temperature. Concrete's already 140 degrees, asphalt's 155 degrees. Those are going to be even warmer than those temperature values today and tomorrow. Make sure that your pets have some form of insulation on their paws before walking on those hard surfaces. Try to keep them in the grass. Make sure that you do bring their water bowl while you are taking them on afternoon walks, because I keep telling you to stay hydrated throughout these blistering hot temperatures. You need to be taking care of yourself, but that also goes for your pets. Anything that you're feeling, they're definitely feeling the same impacts and then some, especially when it comes to concrete and asphalt temperatures. But let's go over some of the signs of heat illnesses because that's going to be a big factor today. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke. We'll start out with some of the symptoms that we can see. I guess I should have moved this graphic a little bit over from my head. And you're going to see a lot of different symptoms. If you're really just not feeling like yourself and you're starting to feel maybe like you're getting sick or something, you're sweating profusely, those are going to be some good indications of some heat illness. Faint or dizzy, a throbbing headache, some good indications, anything that you're feeling on the head. Excessive sweating. However, once you get to heat stroke, you're not going to be sweating whatsoever. So if you're really sweating a good bit, don't let it get to this point where you stop sweating whatsoever. Now you go into your skin. Cool, pale, clammy skin, red, hot, dry skin. Of course, once you start to feel these impacts on the left, that's when it's time to go ahead and head inside. Make sure that you're cooling your body down. You don't want those symptoms on the left to advance into these symptoms that you see on the right. Nausea and vomiting going to be a symptom of both right there. That's obviously going to be a good indication that you need to head inside as well. Rapid weak pulse or rapid strong pulse. Once again, you just start to get a rapid pulse. You're starting to feel really tired. You're starting to feel muscle cramps. May lose consciousness, of course, that a side effect of seeing heat stroke. Once you start to feel any of these on the left, that is your sign to go ahead and head indoors. So it's something that we take very seriously in this time of year. And like I said, everything right now is very relative to what we have been feeling, adding a little bit of an extra punch in terms of how hot it's going to be throughout today and tomorrow compared to what we've had very recently. And a couple of other tips that I can give you: don't leave your children or your pets in vehicles whatsoever. That is a non-negotiable any time of the year. So make sure that you're keeping the AC cranked up very, very high in your cars when you are driving, but making sure whenever you're heading out of your car to maybe go outside, even if it's just for a minute or two, make sure you're not leaving your pets or your children in those vehicles because they can warm up very, very fast. Drink plenty of water, drink plenty of electrolytes. Make sure you are staying hydrated throughout today, and you don't want to get the risk of dehydration whatsoever or any of those symptoms of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Wear sunscreen as well. The sun's going to be out all day long. You may get an occasional peak of shade, but still, it is going to be a predominantly sunny day throughout today and the first half of tomorrow. Make sure you're applying sunscreen and making sure that you do reapply that sunscreen. And if you are very sensitive to the sun, you have the risk of sun poisoning very easily. Make sure you wear protective clothing, not protective clothing. I have a little typo right there, but I was throwing a bunch of these graphics out there so I could give you some tips and tricks on how to combat this heat. And taking breaks in the shade and the AC is going to be a very good thing that you can do as well. Or just hopping in the pool, making sure that you have some way to ensure your body temperature is trying to stay a little bit cooler. But now let's go into the long-range models. I told you we're going to have more of a summer-like forecast with scattered activity in the way of rain on Thursday. Well, that's just going to transition all the way into Friday, all the way into your Saturday, all the way into your Sunday. And why stop there? We'll go all the way into Monday and Tuesday. So yes, some days that there's a shade of green over central Georgia, there's no shade of blue. Some days like next Tuesday, there's a shade of blue, but there's no shade of green. This is because we're getting into this pop-up kind of time of year in terms of rain chances. So just be prepared to duck and dodge a shower or two, maybe even a storm in nature. Still going to be hot, it's still going to be plenty humid. That's what's going to happen more frequently heading into the summertime months. But not really much to write home about because the temperatures are forecasted to take a step down as we go into your extended forecast. Really Thursday on, we're looking at that substantial drop, at least from the upper 90s near 100 all the way back down into the lower 90s. But of course, they will still be feeling a little bit warmer. Now going into your weather impact alert, wrapping it up one more time, Tuesday afternoon, specifically that time frame from really all the way now, which is when the heat advisory is getting going in about 5 minutes or so, all the way until you get into about 7, 8 o'clock tonight. Then finally those temperatures should start to cool down just a little. Heat indices up to 108 is the main impact. And then what you need to do, sensitive groups, elderly, children, limit your time outdoors. I know it's summertime. I know a lot of you want to make the most of these dry weather patches that we do have and not have to deal with any pop-up showers or storms in the afternoons. Limit your time outdoors because those temperatures are going to be more of a threat than maybe just a little bit of a shower kind of ruining any plans that you do have. Hydrate and take breaks in the AC. Of course, I've been hammering those points home all throughout this stream, and I will continue to do so, especially as we get into tomorrow as well. So you do see that weather impact alert in place for today on your 7-day forecast. You may ask, well, why is there not one on Wednesday? Well, like I was telling you, the heat advisory is going to become a lot more common as we go into the summertime months. It's not abnormal to see feels like numbers as high as we have forecasted for today and for tomorrow, but it is the first time that we've had any form of a heat alert so far during the summertime months. So we want to make sure that you're paying extra special close attention to that, not taking it with a grain of salt whatsoever. We'll expand our criteria more so to excessive heat watches and excessive heat warnings in the future because this is just going to become very frequent. We could have a whole stretch of your 7-day forecast that could all be a weather impact alert. So that's not what we want to do. We don't want to dilute the message, but this is the first really big heat spell that is going to have implications for maybe sensitive groups of people and people that do get very dehydrated and have the risk of some heat-related illnesses today. So then we go into Wednesday, another heat advisory very likely, probably for just a shorter time frame, but then a 60% chance of some showers and storms, and then a 30% goes on from there out. Thursday all the way through your weekend, all the way into the beginning of next week, and high temperatures hovering a lot closer to average. Still going to feel a little bit warmer in the mid and upper 90s, some days maybe even close to that 100-degree mark, but it's still a whole lot better than feels like numbers that are getting into the upper 100s, near 110. Hopefully we can keep that out of the future, but it doesn't look like any of the rest of these days, the last 5 days on your 7-day, will warrant any heat alerts, but we could see some fluctuation with this. We could see some of those temperatures change. Now something else we have to talk about. We do have a tropics outlook that right now we've been monitoring a potential area of development, and now just taking first look at this, this is a red shaded area right now. When I last looked at the 8 a.m. hour, it did look like this was an orange shaded area. It had about a 50% chance of developing over the next 2 days and a 50% chance of developing over the next week. Seen a little bit of fluctuation with this. As of yesterday, it was very likely to develop, about 70% for both. This morning it was 40, bounced back up to 50, and now it does look like it is at least 70% once again. So this looks like it has a pretty good likelihood of forming our first named storm of the year, which would get the A name. That would be Andrea. Finally, the Atlantic Basin getting going with at least a named storm, trying to catch up with the Pacific, who's had 5 or 6 already. But right now, this is going to be a fish storm. This is going to be way up in the northern Atlantic Ocean right now. It was very hard to see when I zoomed in right here. There's no really landmarks out here, but giving you a good idea that this number 1 is so far north in the Atlantic Ocean, it's going to continue at an easterly path. So we have the trade winds kind of in our neck of the woods, which propel systems farther over to the west. But once you get above a certain latitude, you start to see those winds go from west to east. And this is going to be higher latitudes that are more equivalent over to areas of New England, the northeast United States. This shouldn't have any impacts for us here in the eastern half of the United States, but it is worth noting that we could see our first named storm of the 2025 hurricane season so far, And the Pacific, of course, has another area of development off the coast of Mexico. I believe it would be F is the next name. I haven't seen anything since Hurricane Eric, but haven't been doing too much looking at the Pacific Basin because not a lot of those impacts are going to be immediately for us. It's going to be western areas of the United States and getting over into areas like Hawaii in the Central Pacific. So this is the area that we are kind of keeping the closest eye on right now. Will this come to fruition? Looks like it. It could be Andrea, and then could just be a fish storm and right off into the sunset. Then we'll keep our eyes out for letter B, which would be the second named storm, but no other areas that we're monitoring right now for potential tropical development. So big time heat today, then some showers and storms. A couple of them could be strong to severe tomorrow afternoon, and then back into the typical summertime swing of the forecast where you may have to duck and dodge a shower each and every day, but still keep those outdoor plans afloat and just kind of play it by ear. It's more likely that you won't see rain as opposed to seeing rain once we get to Thursday all the way through your weekend. But today and tomorrow especially, make sure that you're taking care of your body, making sure that you're finding ways to keep it cool and taking care of your furry friends and your loved ones, those sensitive groups, especially the elderly and especially children. As we get through this very hot stretch, the first big warm spell that we've seen so far in 2025, but most certainly not the last, so we'll continue to keep you updated with everything you need to know. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We'll be back once again tomorrow at 10:30 for a breakdown of tomorrow's big time heat and the potential storm chances.